Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive chamber, his hands clasped behind his back as he faced the towering semicircle of alien representatives. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was designed to intimidate, with its soaring crystal walls and the imposing seats that housed the most powerful beings in known space. Jake had been here many times over the past 3 years, always hopeful, always diplomatic, always believing that humanity could earn its place among the stars through peaceful means. The air in the chamber felt thick and oppressive today. Something was different. The usual murmur of translation devices and whispered conversations had been replaced by an ominous silence. Jake could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon him, not just from the council members but from the gallery where representatives from hundreds of species watched the proceedings. Council Speaker Thexvar, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights, rose from his central position. His voice carried easily through the chamber's acoustics, each word measured and deliberate. Ambassador Morrison of the species known as humans, you stand before this council not as a welcome petitioner, but as a representative of a dangerous threat to galactic peace. Jake felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. He had dealt with hostility before, but never from Thexvar directly. The speaker had always been cold but fair during previous sessions. Honored speaker, I must respectfully disagree with that characterization. Humanity has followed every protocol, respected every boundary, and contributed positively to every joint venture we have undertaken. The Velkan representative, Admiral Kexthor, leaned forward in his seat. The reptilian being's scales seemed to darken with anger. You speak of following protocols while your species spreads across star systems like a plague. In the mere 50 years since your first contact, you have established colonies on over 200 worlds. Your military grows stronger each year. Your technology advances at a pace that threatens the natural order. Jake spread his hands in a gesture of openness. We expand because we must. Our homeworld cannot support our growing population. We advance technologically because we are curious and driven to improve our conditions. These are not crimes. These are the natural behaviors of any sapient species. The Zephyrian Collective's hive mind representative spoke next, its voice a harmony of dozens of individual voices speaking as one. Natural behaviors that have led to the extinction of countless species throughout galactic history. We have seen this pattern before. A young, aggressive race appears, claims peaceful intentions, then destroys everything in its path when it grows strong enough. Jake's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his diplomatic composure. With respect, the Collective's own history shows rapid expansion and military buildup during your formative centuries. The same is true for the Velkans, the Syrians, and nearly every species represented in this chamber. Why should humanity be held to a different standard? Speaker Thexvar clicked his mandibles together, a sound that echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Because we learned from our mistakes. We established this council to prevent future wars, to maintain the balance that has kept peace for over 3,000 years. Your species threatens that balance. The human ambassador took a deep breath, feeling the diplomatic situation slipping away from him despite his best efforts. He had prepared for this possibility, but had hoped it would never come to pass. I have with me detailed proposals for population control measures, military limitations, and technology sharing agreements. Humanity is willing to accept reasonable restrictions on our growth and development in exchange for full membership in this council. A wave of hostile clicking, chittering, and other alien sounds of disapproval swept through the chamber. Jake realized with growing dread that his offers were being rejected before they could even be properly considered. The fix was in. This was not a negotiation. It was a trial, and the verdict had already been decided. Admiral Kexthor stood, his massive form casting a shadow across Jake's position. The Velkan Empire has reviewed these proposals. They are insufficient. Your species cannot be trusted to honor any agreement when it conflicts with your nature. The evidence is clear in your own history of broken treaties, devastating wars, and environmental destruction. Jake felt anger rising in his chest but forced it down. Losing his temper now would only confirm their prejudices. Every species has a violent past. The key word is past. Humanity has learned from its mistakes just as you claim to have done. We have maintained peace on our homeworld for over a century. Our colonies live in harmony with existing ecosystems. Our military exists solely for defense against pirates and other threats. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien laughter, though the sounds were far from pleasant to human ears. Speaker Thexvar raised one of his forearms for silence. Defense, you claim, while your warships patrol beyond your borders and your Marines conduct training exercises that mirror historical invasion tactics. We are not blind to your preparations, Ambassador Morrison. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They had been watching Earth's military more closely than anyone had realized. But there was nothing aggressive about Earth's defensive preparations. Every species maintained military forces. Our fleet patrols are conducted in international space with full transparency. Our military exercises are defensive in nature and are observed by neutral parties when requested. We have nothing to hide. Speaker Thexvar's compound eyes seemed to glitter with malicious satisfaction. Nothing to hide, perhaps, but much to answer for. The Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's petition for membership. Jake straightened his shoulders, preparing himself for rejection, but hoping for some form of conditional acceptance that could be negotiated further. He had dealt with setbacks before and always found a way forward through patience and diplomacy. The Council finds that humanity represents an unacceptable threat to galactic peace and stability. Your petition for membership is denied permanently. Furthermore, your species is declared hostile to galactic civilization. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Hostile designation meant trade embargoes, travel restrictions, and potential military action against human colonies. It was far worse than simple rejection. Honored Speaker, surely this decision is premature. Allow me to return to Earth for further consultation with my government. We can address any specific concerns the Council may have. But Thexvar was not finished. Additionally, this council finds you, Jake Morrison, personally guilty of crimes against galactic peace through your advocacy for this dangerous species. The penalty for such crimes, as established by galactic law, is death. The chamber fell completely silent. Jake felt the blood drain from his face as the full meaning of the words sank in. This was not diplomacy. This was murder disguised as justice. You cannot be serious. I am a diplomatic envoy under the protection of galactic law. Even if you reject humanity's membership, my person is sacred. Admiral Kexthor's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a reptilian face. Diplomatic immunity applies only to representatives of recognized civilizations. Since humanity has been declared hostile, you have no legal protections. Jake's mind raced as he looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support or dissent among the gathered representatives. But the faces and forms around him showed nothing but cold approval or indifference. Some were even displaying what appeared to be satisfaction at the turn of events. His hand moved instinctively to the communication device hidden in his jacket. Earth needed to know what was happening. President Carter and the Joint Chiefs had to understand that this was not a diplomatic setback, but an act of war. With movements that he hoped appeared casual, Jake activated the emergency transmission protocol. This is Ambassador Morrison broadcasting on emergency frequency Alpha 77, he said quietly, knowing his words were being transmitted directly to the White House Situation Room. The Galactic Council has declared humanity hostile and sentenced me to immediate execution. This is not a negotiation failure. This is a deliberate act of aggression against Earth and all her colonies. Speaker Thexvar noticed the transmission and made a sharp gesture to the Velkan guards positioned around the chamber. Cease that communication immediately. Jake continued speaking, his voice growing stronger as he realized this might be his final message to his home world. Tell President Carter that they were never going to accept us. This was planned from the beginning. They fear us because they know we are stronger than we appear. Tell her that my death should be the signal she has been waiting for. The Velkan guards were moving toward him now, their energy weapons charging with an ominous whine. Jake stood straighter, facing his executioners with the dignity befitting a representative of Earth. Tell her to activate Annihilation Protocol. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when they murder our people. The neural disruptor beam struck him before he could say another word, cutting through his nervous system like fire through paper. Jake Morrison, first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, died on his feet with his final words still echoing through the transmission to Earth. On the other side of the gala, the Annihilation Protocol began with a single transmission, sent across the solar system on frequencies that had never been used for civilian communications. Deep space monitoring stations that most Earth governments did not even know existed suddenly came alive with activity. Automated systems that had been dormant for decades started their activation sequences. And in the furthest reaches of human space, Installations hidden behind asteroids and within artificial debris fields began to power up their massive engines. Admiral Connor Blake stood on the bridge of the ESS Retribution, a ship that officially did not exist in any Earth Navy registry. The vessel was 3 times larger than anything the Galactic Council had ever seen from humanity, bristling with weapons technology that made their most advanced warships look like antiques. Blake had been waiting for this moment for 15 years, ever since he had been chosen to command Earth's true military force. The Admiral was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much of war to ever fully believe in peace. He had fought in the last conflicts on Earth before the planetary unification, and he understood something that the diplomats never quite grasped about the nature of power in the universe. Peace was not the absence of war. It was the presence of superior force held in check by wisdom and restraint. "Sir, we have confirmation from all fleet commanders," reported Captain Linda Torres, Blake's second in command. "Operation Prometheus is green across all sectors. We have 450 vessels ready for immediate deployment, with another 600 in reserve positions." Blake nodded slowly as he studied the tactical displays showing the positions of ships that the galaxy had never known existed. For 30 years, since humanity's first tentative steps into space, they had been building this fleet in secret. While the aliens watched Earth's public shipyards produce small exploratory vessels and modest defense craft, the real work had been happening in facilities carved into asteroids, built inside hollow moons, and constructed in the dark spaces between star systems. "Dr. Ross, are the weapon systems fully operational?" Blake asked, turning to the elderly scientist who had spent his entire career developing humanity's hidden arsenal. Dr. Alan Ross looked up from his instrument panel, his weathered face showing a mixture of pride and sadness. "All systems are functioning perfectly, Admiral. The quantum disruptors are charged, the gravitational torpedoes are armed, and the neural scramblers are ready for deployment. I must confess I always hoped we would never need to use them." Blake placed a hand on the scientist's shoulder. "Jake Morrison hoped the same thing, Doctor. But hope is a luxury we can no longer afford." The Retribution's main screen displayed a real-time image of Nexus Prime, the massive diplomatic station where humanity's ambassador had been murdered less than 6 hours ago. The structure was still celebrating, its lights flickering in patterns that indicated festivities among the various alien species aboard. They had no idea that death was already approaching them at faster than light speeds. "Captain Santos, report your status," Blake said into his communication device. The voice that responded belonged to Captain Maria Santos, commander of the strike force that would deliver humanity's first message to the galaxy. "Strike Group Alpha is in position at the edge of the Nexus system, Admiral. All ships are running silent and our stealth systems are holding. The aliens have no idea we are here." Santos was one of Blake's most trusted commanders, a veteran of the secret wars that humanity had fought against pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. She had learned to fight in the darkness between stars, where mercy was a weakness and victory went to whoever struck first and hardest. "Begin your approach, Captain. Make sure they understand this is not a negotiation." "Understood, sir. Beginning attack run now." Light years away, Santos stood on the bridge of her flagship, the ESS Vengeance, watching as her task force dropped out of hyperspace at the very edge of Nexus Prime's sensor range. The diplomatic station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with docking bays that could accommodate thousands of ships and living areas for millions of beings from across the galaxy. "All ships, this is Santos," she broadcast to her fleet on encrypted channels. "Today we write the first chapter of a new galactic order. Today we show the universe what happens when they murder our people. All vessels, attack pattern Omega. No survivors." The human ships accelerated toward the station with a precision that would have impressed even their enemies. Each vessel knew its target. Each weapon system had been programmed for maximum effect. And each captain understood that this was not just an attack, but a statement of intent that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The first indication Nexus Prime had of the approaching threat came when their long-range sensors detected the energy signatures of the human fleet. But by then it was far too late to mount any meaningful defense. The station's shields were designed to protect against accidents and small-scale attacks, not against a coordinated assault by ships that outgunned anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. Santos watched through her targeting system as the quantum disruptors reached their optimal range. "Fire," she ordered, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she was unleashing. The weapons that struck Nexus Prime were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The quantum disruptors tore through the station's shields as if they were made of paper, sending cascading energy failures throughout its massive structure. The gravitational torpedoes that followed created localized space-time distortions that literally pulled sections of the station apart at the molecular level. Within minutes, the greatest diplomatic achievement in galactic history was reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal. Every council member who had voted for Jake Morrison's execution died in those first moments, along with thousands of other beings who had simply been in the wrong place when humanity finally revealed its true nature. But Santos was not finished. As the debris from Nexus Prime continued to expand outward, she activated the communication systems that would broadcast humanity's message to every corner of the galaxy. Attention all members of the former Galactic Council, her voice carried across subspace channels with the authority of absolute power. 6 hours ago you murdered Ambassador Jake Morrison, a diplomatic envoy operating under the protection of your own laws. You declared humanity hostile and threatened our colonies and our people. The message was being received on thousands of worlds, in hundreds of languages by species that had never imagined they might one day face humanity as an enemy, rather than a petitioner seeking acceptance. You made this choice when you decided that murder was an acceptable response to our peaceful overtures. You made this choice when you declared us unworthy of the rights you claim for yourselves. You made this choice when you forgot that mercy is not weakness, and diplomacy is not surrender. Santos paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy before delivering humanity's ultimatum. The death of Ambassador Morrison will be answered with the complete destruction of the Galactic Council and all who supported its decision. Surrender immediately and submit to human authority, or face the same fate as Nexus Prime. You have 72 hours to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence as the full implications of what had just happened began to sink in. Humanity had not just attacked a diplomatic station. They had announced their intention to overthrow the entire galactic order and replace it with their own. On Earth, President Carter watched the reports coming in from across human space as the Annihilation protocol continued to unfold. The secret installations were revealing themselves one by one, emerging from their hiding places like ancient monsters awakening from slumber. The fleet that Admiral Blake had spent decades building was finally taking its place in the open, and the galaxy was getting its first look at humanity's true military capability. General Hayes entered the Oval Office with the latest status reports. Madam President, all Phase 1 objectives have been completed successfully. Nexus Prime is destroyed and our demands have been transmitted to every major world in the galaxy. Early intelligence suggests widespread panic among the Council species. Carter nodded, but her expression remained grim. What about their military response? Admiral Blake reports that several Vulcan and Zephyrian fleets are mobilizing, but they appear to be moving defensively, rather than attempting any immediate retaliation. Our intelligence suggests they are still trying to understand how we could have hidden such a large fleet from their surveillance. Director Sullivan added her own assessment. The psychological impact has been even greater than we anticipated, Madam President. Many species are already requesting direct communication with Earth, apparently hoping to negotiate separate peace agreements before we turn our attention to them. Carter walked to her window again, looking up at the stars that no longer seemed as distant as they once had. Jake Morrison had died believing that diplomacy could bridge any gap between species, that reasonable beings could always find common ground through patient negotiation and mutual respect. He had been wrong, but his death had revealed a truth that was perhaps more important than any diplomatic victory could have been. The galaxy was not a place where the peaceful could. Fleet Admiral Zekthar of the Vulcan Empire stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the tactical displays that showed the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 3,000 ships from across the galaxy had answered the Council's emergency call for unity against the human threat. The massive fleet stretched across several light years, a testament to the combined might of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. The Admiral was an old warrior who had fought in the last great galactic war centuries ago, and he understood the art of overwhelming force. The humans had surprised everyone with their attack on Nexus Prime, But they were still just one species facing the combined military power of hundreds of worlds. No matter how advanced their hidden ships might be, mathematics was mathematics, and 3,000 ships would crush any force the humans could field. "Admiral, we are receiving final status reports from all fleet commanders," announced his aide, a young Velkan officer whose scales still held the bright green of inexperience. "The Zephyrian Collective has committed 200 vessels. The Syrian Federation has sent 150, and smaller contingents from 40 other species have joined the formation." Zekthar nodded approvingly as he watched the fleet organize itself into the traditional battle formations that had served the galaxy well for thousands of years. The heavy battleships formed the center line, with cruisers and destroyers arranged in supporting positions. It was a formation designed to bring maximum firepower to bear on any enemy foolish enough to face them in open battle. "Excellent," the Admiral said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never lost a major engagement. "The humans may have caught Nexus Prime by surprise, but they will find that fighting a prepared enemy is very different from murdering diplomats. Set course for the Sol system. It is time to end this rebellion before it spreads further." Light years away, in the outer reaches of Earth's solar system, Colonel Danny Wright watched the approaching alien armada through sensors that the enemy could never have imagined possible. Wright commanded the solar defense grid, a network of hidden weapons platforms, cloaked ships, and automated defense systems that had been built over 30 years of careful preparation. Wright was a veteran of humanity's colonial wars, where he had learned to fight against overwhelming odds using terrain, stealth, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The aliens were coming with their traditional formations and their overwhelming numbers, but they had no idea what kind of battlefield they were entering. "Sir, the alien fleet will reach the outer detection grid in 6 hours, reported Lieutenant Kelly Barnes, Wright's tactical officer. "They are maintaining standard approach formations and appear to be heading directly for Earth." Wright smiled grimly as he studied the three-dimensional display showing the alien fleet's approach vector. They were coming in exactly as the computer models had predicted, following the most direct route to Earth and maintaining the kind of formation that would be devastating against any conventional opponent. "Perfect," Wright said quietly. "They are walking directly into the trap we have been preparing for 3 decades. All units begin Phase 1 positioning. Silent running protocols are in effect until further notice." Across the solar system, weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids began to shift position. Ships that had been hiding in the shadow of planets started their engines. Automated defense systems that had been dormant for years activated their targeting computers. The Sol system, which appeared empty to the approaching aliens, was actually filled with more military hardware than most species possessed in their entire empires. Admiral Zekthar felt confident as his fleet entered the outer edges of the human solar system. His sensors showed nothing more threatening than a few small patrol craft and some primitive mining operations. The intelligence reports had suggested that humanity might have hidden military assets, but if they existed, they were apparently too small or too well hidden to pose any serious threat. "Admiral, we are detecting some unusual energy signatures from various locations throughout the system," reported his sensor operator, a spider-like being whose multiple eyes allowed him to monitor dozens of displays simultaneously. "The patterns are inconsistent with normal civilian operations." Zekthar dismissed the report with a wave of his clawed hand. "Probably just their industrial facilities powering down in preparation for our arrival. The humans know they cannot fight us directly, so they are likely preparing to surrender." But Colonel Wright had no intention of surrendering, and the energy signatures the aliens were detecting were not industrial facilities shutting down. They were weapon systems powering up, targeting computers acquiring locks, and trap mechanisms preparing to spring. "All units, this is Wright," the colonel broadcast on encrypted channels to his scattered forces. "The aliens have entered the killing zone. Execute deception protocol immediately." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come, assuming there were any alien military academies left to study it. The human defense of Sol was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a masterpiece of tactical deception and strategic patience that turned the aliens' own strengths against them. The first sign that something was wrong came when Admiral Zekthar's sensors detected a massive explosion behind his fleet. A group of asteroids that his ships had passed minutes earlier suddenly revealed themselves to be camouflaged weapons platforms, and they had just destroyed the rear guard of his formation with a coordinated barrage of antimatter torpedoes. Before the Admiral could react to this development, more hidden platforms revealed themselves throughout his fleet's formation. What had appeared to be empty space was actually filled with human military assets that had been waiting patiently for their prey to enter the perfect position. Commander Sophie Mitchell led one of the most audacious operations in military history, as her boarding teams used stealth shuttles to infiltrate alien ships while their crews were still trying to understand what was happening. Mitchell was a former Special Forces operative who had spent years learning alien ship designs and combat techniques. And now she put that knowledge to devastating use. Team Alpha, we have control of the Vulcan cruiser Deathmore, Mitchell reported as her Marines secured the ship's bridge. Beginning conversion protocols now. The conversion protocols were perhaps humanity's most brilliant innovation in space warfare. Rather than simply destroying enemy vessels, human boarding teams captured them and turned their weapons against their own fleets. Within minutes of being boarded, alien ships found themselves firing on their former allies under human control. Admiral Zekthar watched in horror as his perfectly organized formation disintegrated into chaos. Ships that had been his allies moments before were now targeting his remaining vessels with their own weapons. Hidden human ships were emerging from behind planets and moons, adding their firepower to the devastating crossfire that was tearing his fleet apart. All ships, scatter formation immediately, the Admiral ordered, but it was already too late. The humans had trapped his fleet in a carefully prepared killing zone, and every move his ships made only brought them deeper into the web of destruction that Wright's people had spent years preparing. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 4 hours. When it was over, more than 2/3 of the great galactic fleet was destroyed or captured. Admiral Zekthar himself was taken prisoner when human Marines stormed his flagship, and the few ships that managed to escape carried news that would spread panic throughout the galaxy. Wright stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in galactic history. The operation had gone even better than their most optimistic projections, but he felt no satisfaction in the victory. This was not a triumph to be celebrated, it was a necessity to be completed. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from 47 captured vessels," reported Lieutenant Barnes. "What are your orders regarding prisoners?" Wright considered the question carefully. The aliens had come to his solar system with the intention of wiping out humanity, and they had murdered Earth's ambassador in cold blood. But he was still a soldier, not a butcher, and there were rules that separated civilization from chaos. "Process all prisoners according to the Geneva Conventions," Wright ordered. "They came here to commit genocide, but we are not them. Make sure they understand that their treatment depends entirely on their cooperation." News of the devastating defeat reached the remaining Council worlds within hours, carried by the few alien ships that had managed to escape the solar system. The reports were barely believable, describing human military capabilities that far exceeded anything the galaxy's intelligence services had suspected. On the Vulcan homeworld, Empress Veltara called an emergency session of her War Council as reports continued to arrive from the disaster at Sol. The humans had not simply won a battle. They had demonstrated that every assumption the galaxy had made about their military capabilities was wrong. "How is this possible?" the Empress demanded, her scales shifting to the deep red color that indicated extreme agitation. "Our intelligence reports indicated that the humans had perhaps 50 warships of margin." President Carter stood before the joint session of Congress as the assembled representatives of humanity waited in complete silence for her words. The chamber was filled to capacity, with senators and congressmen who had flown back to Earth from colonies across human space to hear what their leader would say about the war that now consumed the galaxy. The president's face showed the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives, both human and alien, but her voice was steady as she began to speak. "Fellow Americans, fellow humans, 4 days ago our ambassador was murdered in cold blood by the Galactic Council. Yesterday, the combined fleets of that same council came to our solar system with the intention of wiping out our civilization." A murmur ran through the chamber as the representatives absorbed the full meaning of what had happened. Most of them had only learned about humanity's secret military capabilities in the past few days, and the scope of the deception that had been maintained for decades was still difficult to comprehend. "Those fleets no longer exist," Carter continued, her words carrying across the chamber with absolute authority. "Our forces have proven that 30 years of careful preparation and strategic patience have given us capabilities that our enemies never suspected. But this victory has also revealed the true nature of the galaxy we sought to join." The president paused, looking out over the faces of the men and women who would have to authorize the actions she was about to propose. "The Galactic Council has shown us that they view diplomacy as weakness, peace as an opportunity for treachery, and mercy as something to be exploited. They have declared war on humanity not because of anything we have done, but because of what they fear we might become." Carter's voice grew stronger as she reached the heart of her address. "I stand before you today to request authorization for total war against the Galactic Council and all species that support their actions. This will not be a limited conflict or a negotiated settlement. This will be the complete destruction of the political and military systems that allowed the murder of our ambassador to occur." The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives grappled with the implications of what their president was proposing. Total war meant the systematic destruction of alien governments, the occupation of their worlds, and the imposition of human authority across the galaxy. Congressman Bill Harper of Texas stood to address the chamber, his voice carrying the weight of his constituents' concerns. "Madam President, are we talking about genocide? Are we going to become the monsters that they claimed we already were?" Carter's expression softened slightly as she recognized the moral concerns that every decent human being would have about such drastic action. "Congressman Harper, we are not talking about the extermination of alien species. We are talking about the complete destruction of the governmental and military systems that allowed the attempted genocide of humanity. Any species that surrenders and accepts human authority will be treated fairly and allowed to prosper under our protection." Senator Laura Mitchell of California raised her own concerns. "What about the species that had nothing to do with Ambassador Morrison's murder? Are we going to punish entire civilizations for the actions of their governments?" The president's response was immediate and unwavering. "Senator Mitchell, every species in the Galactic Council participated in the vote that declared humanity hostile. Every government that sent ships to attack our solar system bears responsibility for that decision. The time for diplomatic distinctions and careful negotiations ended when they murdered our representative. The vote, when it came, was overwhelming. Congress authorized the president to use any means necessary to secure humanity's survival and establish a new galactic order under human leadership. The declaration of total war was transmitted to every human colony within hours, and the full industrial might of humanity began to mobilize for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. General Pete Turner received his orders while standing on the bridge of the troop transport ESS Liberty, surrounded by the largest invasion force in human history. Turner was a veteran of every major conflict humanity had fought since leaving Earth, and he understood the logistics of interstellar warfare better than anyone alive. "General, we have received authorization for Operation Cleansing Fire," reported Colonel Janet Stone, Turner's chief of staff. "All targets are designated for immediate invasion. No negotiations, no quarter asked or given." Turner nodded as he studied the tactical displays showing the positions of his invasion fleets. He had 2 million Marines under his command, equipped with power armor and weapons that made them individually superior to any alien soldier in the galaxy. More importantly, they were backed by a logistical system that could keep them supplied and reinforced across interstellar distances. "Begin immediate deployment to all primary targets," Turner ordered. "I want boots on the ground within 72 hours. Every council world, every military installation, every government facility is to be secured or destroyed." The first world to feel the full weight of human military power was Velcara Prime, homeworld of the Velcan Empire, and seat of the government that had orchestrated Ambassador Morrison's execution. Major Amy Rodriguez led the assault force that descended from orbit like a falling storm, her Marines cutting through the planet's defenses with surgical precision. Rodriguez was a combat veteran who had earned her reputation fighting pirates in the outer colonies, where the rules of engagement were simple and brutal. The Velcan defenders were numerous and well-equipped, but they had never faced an enemy that combined human tactical flexibility with superior technology and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than total victory. "Alpha Company, secure the Imperial Palace," Rodriguez commanded as her forces spread across the capital city. Bravo and Charlie companies. Neutralize all military installations. Delta Company. Establish control over the communication centers. Anyone who resists dies. The battle for Velcara Prime lasted less than 18 hours. The Velcan military, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, collapsed under the coordinated assault of human forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. Empress Veltara herself was captured in her palace, along with the entire Imperial War Council. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds as human invasion forces struck simultaneously at targets throughout Galactic Council space. The aliens had prepared for conventional warfare, but humanity fought with tactics that seemed to come from a different universe entirely, Admiral. Blake's fleet provided orbital support for the ground invasions while simultaneously hunting down any remaining Council military assets. The Admiral watched from his flagship as another alien world fell to human forces, its government buildings burning and its military installations reduced to rubble. Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from 17 different species, reported Captain Torres. They are offering complete capitulation in exchange for protection from our forces. Blake considered the requests carefully. Some of the species making offers had been among the most vocal supporters of the Council's decision to execute Ambassador Morrison, while others had simply gone along with the majority vote. But the Annihilation protocol made no distinction between willing participants and reluctant followers. Inform all surrendering species that their requests will be considered only after the complete destruction of the Galactic Council, Blake responded. Any species that wishes to avoid the fate of the Falcons and Zephyrians must prove their sincerity by actively assisting in the elimination of Council loyalists. Dr. Alan Ross worked around the clock in his mobile laboratory, developing new weapons and countermeasures as fast as his team could implement them. The scientist had spent decades creating humanity's secret arsenal, but the demands of total war required constant innovation and adaptation. Doctor, we need something that can penetrate the Zephyrian collective consciousness, requested General Turner during one of his regular briefings with the weapons development team. Our psychological warfare techniques are ineffective against a hive mind that can simply disconnect individual units when they become compromised. Ross looked up from his work, his eyes red from exhaustion, but still sharp with the intelligence that had made him indispensable to humanity's war effort. I have been working on a neural virus that can propagate through their collective network. It will not kill them, but it will make them susceptible to human mental conditioning techniques. The neural virus was deployed against the Zephyrian homeworld within a week, and the results exceeded even Ross's expectations. The collective consciousness that had ruled millions of beings for thousands of years simply ceased to function, leaving individual Zephyrians confused and vulnerable to human psychological operations. Commander Sophie Mitchell led the teams that convinced former collective members to join humanity's cause, using techniques that combined compassion with strategic manipulation. You are no longer slaves to the collective mind, she told groups of confused aliens. Under human rule, you will be individuals with the right to think your own thoughts and make your own choices. Many of the former collective members embraced their newfound individuality and became some of humanity's most effective allies in the ongoing war. They provided intelligence about remaining Council Saint. 6 months after Ambassador Jake Morrison's execution, the last stronghold of the Galactic Council fell to human forces without firing a single shot. The fortress world of Sanctum, which had been built over thousands of years as the ultimate refuge for Council leadership, surrendered when its defenders realized that resistance would only delay the inevitable by a few hours. President Carter stood on the rebuilt observation deck of what had once been Nexus Prime, now renamed Morrison Station, in honor of the man whose death had changed the galaxy forever. The massive structure had been reconstructed using human engineering techniques that made it larger and more efficient than its predecessor, serving as the new seat of galactic government under the Terran hegemony. The view from the station showed a steady stream of ships arriving from across the galaxy, carrying representatives from species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians. Now they came as supplicants, seeking favorable treatment under the new order that Earth had imposed through superior force and strategic planning. Admiral Blake approached the president as she watched the diplomatic traffic flowing around the station. The admiral looked older than he had 6 months ago, the weight of commanding the most successful military campaign in galactic history showing in the lines around his eyes and the gray that had spread through his hair. "Madam President, the final surrender documents have been signed," Blake reported, his voice carrying satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. "Former Emperor Scythefall of the Zephyrian Collective and Empress Veltara of the Velkan Empire have both formally acknowledged human authority over their territories. The Great Galactic War is officially over." Carter nodded slowly as she absorbed the historical significance of the moment. In less than a year, humanity had gone from being rejected as unworthy of galactic membership to becoming the undisputed rulers of known space. The transformation had been so complete and so rapid that many species were still struggling to understand how it had happened. "What is the final count on casualties and surrenders?" the president asked. Though she already knew the numbers from the daily briefings, Blake consulted his datapad, though the figures were burned into his memory from months of careful tracking. "We have accepted the surrender of 437 species. Total military casualties among Council forces number approximately 50 million dead and twice that many wounded or captured. Civilian casualties have been kept to less than 2 million across all theaters of operation." The low civilian casualty count was something that Carter took particular pride in. Despite the massive scale of the military destruction, humanity had proven that it was possible to conduct total war while still maintaining moral standards that distinguish civilization from barbarism. General Turner materialized on the station's main holographic display, broadcasting from the surface of Velkara Prime, where he was overseeing the integration of former Velkan military units into the new Terran Defense Force. The general looked tired but pleased as he delivered his report. "Madam President, we have completed the reorganization of all former Council military assets," Turner announced. "Those personnel who have demonstrated genuine loyalty to human authority have been retained and promoted based on merit. Former enemy officers who show leadership potential are being trained in human military doctrine and ethics." The integration of alien military forces had been one of the most challenging aspects of establishing the new galactic order. Many former Council officers had expected to be executed or imprisoned, but humanity's approach of judging individuals based on their actions rather than their species had created opportunities for redemption that few had anticipated. Major Rodriguez appeared alongside Turner on the display, her power armor showing the scars of countless battles fought across the galaxy. She had become something of a legend among both human and alien forces for her combination of tactical brilliance and unexpected mercy toward surrendering enemies. "Ma'am, we have established human government centers on all major Council worlds," Rodriguez reported. "Local populations are adapting to our administrative systems faster than projected. Many species are expressing gratitude for the stability and efficiency of human rule compared to the old Council bureaucracy." This was perhaps the most surprising development of the post-war period. Many alien populations had discovered that human administration was more fair and efficient than the corrupt Council system they had endured for millennia. Species that had expected harsh treatment under occupation instead found themselves with better living conditions and more opportunities than they had ever known. Dr. Ross joined the conference from his new laboratory facility on Morrison Station, where he was working on peaceful applications for the technologies that had won the war. The scientist had struggled with the moral implications of his weapons research, but the post-war period had given him the opportunity to focus on projects that would benefit all species under human rule. "Madam President, our terraforming and medical research programs are showing remarkable results," Ross announced with genuine enthusiasm. "We have successfully adapted human agricultural techniques to 17 different alien biologies, and our universal medical protocols are reducing disease and extending lifespans across multiple species." The sharing of human technology with former enemies had been controversial on Earth, but Carter had insisted that the new galactic order must offer genuine benefits to all species, rather than simple domination. The results had vindicated her policy, as many alien worlds were experiencing prosperity and stability that they had never known under Council rule. Captain Santos appeared on the display from her flagship, which was patrolling the outer regions of human space, where some Council loyalists were still attempting to organize resistance movements. Her expression was professional, but showed the satisfaction of someone who had helped build something worthwhile from the ashes of war. "Madam President, we have neutralized the last organized resistance cell," Santos reported. "The former Council Admiral Korthvin has been captured along with his remaining followers. He has requested to speak with you directly regarding terms for his surrender." Carter considered the request carefully. Admiral Korthvin had been one of the most vocal supporters of Ambassador Morrison's execution and had led several brutal raids against human colonies during the war. But he was also the last significant military leader still opposing human authority, and his surrender would mark the final end of organized resistance. "Bring him to Morrison Station," Carter decided. "I want every species in the galaxy to see that even the most dedicated enemies of humanity can find redemption under our rule if they genuinely renounce their past actions." The surrender ceremony took place in the main assembly hall of Morrison Station, with representatives from hundreds of species watching, as Admiral Korthvin formally acknowledged human authority. The alien officer was a proud being who had fought against humanity until the very end, but he showed genuine dignity as he spoke the words that ended the last vestige of the old galactic order. "I, Admiral Korthvin of the former Galactic Council Defense Force, do hereby surrender all remaining military assets under my command to the legitimate authority of the Terran hegemony," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I acknowledge that my resistance to human rule was based on prejudice and fear, rather than legitimate grievance. And I pledge to serve the new galactic order with the same dedication I once showed to the Council." President Carter accepted the surrender with words that would be remembered by historians as the moment when humanity's transformation from rebels to rulers became complete. "Admiral Korthvin, your courage in fighting for your beliefs even when those beliefs were wrong shows the kind of character that the new galactic order needs. You are hereby offered a position in the Terran Defense Force, where your experience and skills can be used to protect all species under human authority." The offer of military rank to a former enemy commander sent a powerful message throughout the galaxy that humanity's rule was based on merit and potential, rather than species loyalty or past allegiances. Many former council officers who had been hiding or attempting to organize resistance movements began to consider surrender as a viable option for their future. The months that followed saw the rapid establishment of human colonies and administrative centers throughout the galaxy. Unlike the old council system, which had concentrated power in the hands of ancient species while treating younger civilizations as subjects, the Terran hegemony promoted individuals based on their abilities and contributions to the common good. Commander Mitchell found herself appointed as the first human governor of the former Zephyrian collective territories, where her experience with psychological operations proved invaluable in helping former hive mind members adapt to individual decision-making. Her combination of firm authority and genuine compassion made her popular among both human colonists and alien populations. The key to successful governance, Mitchell explained during one of her regular reports to Earth, is understanding that every species has something valuable to contribute to the new order. The Zephyrians have incredible coordination abilities when they choose to work together voluntarily. The Velkans have engineering,